go ahead and get us started. I'm really happy to see some of the folks joined me again from this morning session, which is awesome. And if you're new, if you didn't join me before, welcome. I'm excited to get another hour to talk about service coordination, one of my favorite topics. So if I didn't meet you last time, I'll quickly introduce myself. I'm Dana Childress. I'm in Virginia. I currently work at Old Dominion University as an assistant professor in early childhood special education, which includes early intervention. And I'm often saying that a lot. Like the program definitely is really strong in the preschool side of early childhood special ed, but I'm such an advocate for EI. I'm always telling my students there's this great field and there's all these opportunities. You can be a service coordinator, you can be an early intervention educator. So I love both of the fields. Before I did this, I was on our state's professional development team doing a lot of training, including training service coordinators. Prior to that, I worked for about 15 years as a service coordinator and an educator, kind of in a blended role, and a little bit of time as a program director. And my son was in EI for a little while, so I've kind of seen EI from all kinds of different lenses. And I really like talking about this topic. This morning we talked about coaching. I like this topic because I really believe that service coordinators are team leaders. And I believe that leadership looks all kinds of different ways, right? It's not just about the person that's in the leadership role as maybe like the program, like I said, a program director, program coordinator. Um, those people are absolutely important. And I want to find out what y'all's roles are in just a second. But leadership is like a practice that we use and that anyone can use. And I think that we're going to talk today about leadership practices that absolutely overlap with service coordination, whether you are maybe like the coordinator over the service coordinators in your program, or you are a service coordinator. Sometimes you're both, right? But a service coordinator working directly with families, I guarantee you're engaging in some leadership. So you can see the subtitle here. There's no early intervention team without you as a service coordinator, and that's actually federally mandated. So we're going to talk about that because that's a pretty cool thing too. So, oh, let me see. I think I do want to find out. I would love to know. I think I see lots of folks from this morning, but let me know in the chat your role. So if you are a service coordinator, let me know of that. If you're a service coordinator who has an additional role, maybe as an administrator, maybe you're here with a different role. So just drop it into the chat. And I would love to see if we have folks in addition to our service coordinators joining us. I saw a social worker pop in, which there's definitely overlap with that. Unit coordinator, senior service coordinator. Okay, Paige, so that's probably has some administrative duties, I'm assuming. See a couple lead service coordinators, service coordination manager, Patty. Okay. Okay. Awesome. So lots and lots of service coordinators. Which one? Cynthia does a little bit of both service coordination and developmental intervention. That sounds like the roles I had when I was practicing, Cynthia. So we've got assistant director, unit coordinator. Shelly has lots of roles. You're playing all the roles there. Unit coordinator with a caseload. I always thought that was kind of nice when you kind of keep your toes still in the water of service coordination when you're also leading, but it's not always easy. Procedural safeguards coordinator, Beth, that's a new title. I haven't heard that one before. So a little bit of a mix. Lots of our service coordinators and some of our leaders who maybe lead our service coordinators, which is fantastic. So here is where we're headed today. So for this session, we're going to connect service coordination activities and expertise to leadership. And we're going to do that through looking at some leadership competencies that were really developed for early intervention leadership as a broader concept. But I'm going to connect them with service coordination, and I think you will definitely see where the overlap fits. We're going to talk about some specific strategies that leaders, team members, and service coordinators can add to their practice. We're going to focus, though, today, I think, on the leaders and the service coordinators because that's who's in the room with me today. So we might talk less about the other team members, although I'm happy to talk about those because you do your work without them. They can't do their work without you. And what we know from the research is that sometimes service coordinators feel like their other team members don't understand their role. So we'll talk a little bit about all that. And then I guess one of my goals with this kind of session, maybe with both sessions today, is to celebrate the value that service coordinators bring to the team. So that's kind of always my goal with these kind of conversations about service coordination. So let's pretty much just dive right in as folks are starting to join us. So we know that early intervention is team-based work. It was built that way when it was designed in the federal law. When we think about how our Our recommended practices has to have developed across time. We've always been family-centered and team-based. We really can't do this work effectively without each other, right? We really can't, there's no one team member really can manage all of the tasks of service of early intervention. And sometimes it feels like the service coordinator is the one trying to juggle all of those balls in the air. But really, no one person can do this work. So when we think about that, other than what I guess I've said, why do you think our team was designed this way? Why is or our team, our system, why do you think service coordination was designed as team-based work? Like, why do we always need a team to support families? Drop that in the chat and let me know what you think. Why do we always need a team? Why is this work best done with a team? Yeah, Sarah says more feedback, more eyes in the home. And yep, it takes a village. Multiple disciplines bring multiple skills. Excellent point. Different perspectives, different specialties. There are so many steps to address, Julie. That is true. It helps us bring balance. I love that. It covers all areas of development. Helps make sure the family is the focus. That's a great point. Oh, Nadine, that's important. It kind of protects against a conflict of interest. Like if there's one person working with the family, it's really hard to find somebody else or to speak up to that person to say this isn't working. So it's a good point. Keeps burnout lower. And we know burnout, Holly, is an important and unfortunately a pervasive problem in service coordination. Actually, it's across all kinds of special education fields, unfortunately. But yeah, I agree with you guys. It takes a team to support the whole child, and it ensures that all concerns and priorities are addressed. So just like I was starting to say before, we know that no one person can do everything for the family. As you guys alluded to, I think in the chat, development is interrelated and interconnected. Like you can't work on any one area of development without addressing other areas, right? Like we can't help kids learn to walk without engaging with them socially, without likely talking to them, right? We do it in a play-based environment. So development being interrelated, it's helpful to have that cross-disciplinary approach, like you guys said, for multiple perspectives, not only for the family, but for the individual team member, that family member, and the other professional team members. And we know that a team-based approach aligns with our recommended practices, which is really important. So if we have a team-based approach, I think it's really important that we have a leader of the team. And so there's no EI team without the leadership of a service coordinator. Now, there are some folks who write in our field and they don't love the idea of saying the service coordinator is the team leader because they're like, everybody on the team is equal, the expertise is equal, the family is an equal team member. And I 100% agree with that. However, the service coordinator, as you guys know, is the person whose role is to be the primary main point of contact for the family and to be a resource expert to help the family and other team members get linked together, but also linked to outside resources. So somebody is also got to guide the team and make sure the team is working and the work is aligning with the IFSP. That takes leadership, and that's the service coordinator's role. So there's really no team without you guys. So we can say that like theoretically, right? This team couldn't happen without you. But it's also written into the federal law. So service coordination is the only early intervention service that when Congress developed the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, Part C, which we all know that we operate under, Congress federally mandated that all children and families receive service coordination. All children enrolled in early intervention receive that. So your service is the only service that all kids receive, kids and families receive, and your name is actually the only service provider name that is federally mandated to be on the IFSP. So I think that's really important for you guys to absorb and think of that when this whole situation, when early intervention was being outlined in the law, Congress felt that the service coordinator was that important, that that person's name should be there and every child and family should receive that. That's how important the work you do is. Sometimes we know that and our leaders know that. Sometimes we really need our leaders to know that. And I say we because I was a former service coordinator. Sometimes we really need other team members to understand and recognize that. So I really encourage you to promote that importance, your leadership to promote the importance, to help others understand what this role is and why service coordinators act as the leaders. Now, when we look at the federal law, we see this definition of service coordination. Service coordination is defined as services to assist and enable an infant or toddler with a disability and the child's family to receive the services and rights, including procedural safeguards. So, in this definition, because this is educational law, we see the concept of infant or toddler with a disability. We know in our world it includes kids with developmental delays and disabilities. But we can see an emphasis here on facilitating services and making sure families are aware of their rights and procedural safeguards. The Part C of IDA actually outlines a list of very specific service coordination activities that you guys are responsible for. Anybody know how many are in there? Want to take a guess? How many specific service coordination activities are in the law? Drop a guess in chat. You can just drop a number. What do you think? What would be your guess? Christine said a whole lot. It feels like a lot, right? You guys are doing a lot. I just noticed I have an error on my slide. Whenever there's an error in my presentations and my students find it, I always give them extra credit and they love it. So then they're like hunting for the things I've made a mistake. Where I have IDEA 2024, it actually should be 2004. We actually haven't had a reauthorization of IDEA since 2004. So just a quick one. Holly wins for the best answer there. 10,000 service coordination activities. Kind of love that answer. But I see a lot of numbers. The actual number is 10. You guys do tons of stuff, right? Kimberly says 50. We do 50 things. Here are the 10 activities. There's a lot on this slide, but we're going to briefly go through these. And I want you to think about which of these activities requires you to be in a leadership role or perhaps use leadership skills. So you can see the law says part of the service coordinator's role is helping parents obtain access to services. So that's a huge part of what you do to facilitate connecting families with the service providers to provide the services on their IFSP. You're coordinating those services in the Part C system and outside, coordinating evaluations assessment, keeping up with the IFSP, making sure it's developed and reviewed, referring families to other providers, monitoring the delivery of service, which I think is a huge part of what we do, conducting follow-up activities. There you again, you see informing families of their rights and procedural safeguards, coordinating funding, and facilitating that transition plan. 10 activities, but we could put so many bullets under all of these activities. Yep. Lisa asked, what year was IDA established for Part C? 94-142 came first, I think. You know, Lisa, I remember when 94-142 came in. You're right. Part C was established in 1986. And it was actually called Part H at the time. And then it got switched to Part C. And so the last authorization we have, and I want to say, somebody can help me out with this. I wonder if we switched to Part C in the 2024 reauthorization. That one I can't remember, but yeah, it's been around a while. But it's been around a while, but it is relatively a baby field, air quote, like it's a young field compared to education, which is a huge history. Special education, still a huge history, but like shorter than the broad field of education. And then we have early intervention, so we're still kind of a new-ish field, our baby field. But that's a great question. So let's try something. I'm going to get you guys to use your annotation tools. And what I'm going to have you do, I'm going to walk you through it, and then I'm going to have you drop a stamp on my slide here to tell me which of these 10 activities requires leadership skills. So to access your annotation tools, look at the top of your screen where you'll see Viewing Dana's screen. Click the downward caret. You'll open up a drop-down menu, and you should see Annotate. An annotation menu will pop up, like a toolbar will pop up on the left side of your screen. Click the button that looks like a check mark, and that's a stamp button. And then you're going to drop a stamp on the slide. I'll do it so you can see what it looks like, to say like, okay, maybe number 1 up here, or maybe number 2 requires leadership skills. So go ahead. Okay, here they come. If you're having any trouble with annotation, you can drop the numbers of the activities in the chat. Let's see, we have, how many people we have here? 191 with us. Okay, thanks, Lisa. I see yours going in the chat. Boy, do I see a lot happening on here. This is fantastic. This like literally visually makes my point. All of this stuff, like you probably can't even read it anymore. All of this stuff requires leadership. So much of the work you do, right? Informing families of their rights and procedural safeguards, a key service coordination activity that you have to know about how those rights apply at each step in the process, help families advocate for their rights, and make sure those rights are implemented effectively. Transition, you're leading families down that path and helping them understand their options and make their choices. Evaluating the IFSP, you're often the leader that pulls that team together. Same with assessment. Lots and lots of stuff here that you can see visually here. Lots of these activities require leadership. So what I'm going to do, it looks like mostly we have paused. So I'm going to ask you guys to pause putting your marks on the screen. I'm going to erase these so we can see a clean slide. I'm going to ask you guys to X out of your toolbar. So look at the bottom of the annotation toolbar and hit the red X, and then we're going to keep going. So thank you guys for walking through that with me. All right, so hit your red toolbar, close down the annotations. We might use that again in a little bit, so we'll go back to it. But yeah, leadership is woven throughout service coordination. So when we think about it, then all that stuff you've got to do, all the 10,000 activities, what are the knowledge and skills that you think are essential for service coordinators to be able to complete those activities? What do service coordinators need to know? And what skills do you need to have as a service coordinator to do all the stuff we just saw on the previous slide? Communication skills, Jenna. Yep. Joanna says strong organization. Oh my gosh, that's popping up a lot. So, so important. It's really hard to do this job if you're not well organized. Time management. Yep, Scotty, I agree with that one. Sarah says how to mirror others' emotions and how to read them, right? Sarah, read and respond, kind of be responsive that way. We need collaboration skills, facilitating teamwork. We need knowledge of child development, Robin, great point. Boy, Lisa, yes, we need patience. Ability to multitask. Yep. I thought it said meditation skills, and I was going to say, yes, we need meditation to calm our nervous systems when it's a crazy day, but mediation skills for sure. We need empathy, interpersonal skills, people skills. We need knowledge of procedures and policies. Monique says we need humor. We need a sense of humor. Absolutely. So much good things. We need attention to detail. Yeah. Professionalism, documentation skills, and flexibility for sure. Ignaciosis flexibility. Yeah. Cultural competence, Gabriella, so important. You guys got it. Lots of these are so important. So these are important when we're hiring service coordinators, right? They're super important that service coordinators have the opportunity to develop them, just like Lisa said there, through good training, through good mentoring and support. Because how you use any of these skills, you kind of have to know how to use them, but use them in different ways across different team members, different families, different situations. The work of service coordination is really complex, and I don't know sometimes if others recognize that. So there is a resource available that I wanted to make sure you guys knew about that actually has provided information to the field about the knowledge and skills that service coordinators need that line up really well with what you have here. So the Division for Early Childhood and the IDEA Infant and Toddler Coordinators Association, I'm going to clear our screen just one more second. Make sure you X out of your toolbar, your annotation toolbar. Released a joint position statement on service coordination and early intervention. I'm going to drop that link into the chat in case you're not familiar with it. That was released in 2020, and I was on that board. I chaired that committee that put that together. It's really the first time that a national statement has been put out around service coordination. Within that document, there's an appendix, and the appendix includes knowledge and skills for service coordinators and outlines knowledge areas, and you see the 6 on screen, and kind of indicators of each knowledge area that's really specific to service coordination. And we haven't had that before either. What we find across the country is there's variety in who is hired for this role, what their educational and professional backgrounds are, and what their knowledge of early intervention is. Many folks come to this field without a background in early intervention because that background is so specialized. So we need to make sure our service coordinators have or gain this knowledge. So let me ask you guys, if you think you can use your annotation tool again, you can open that toolbar back up, even though I've told you to close it twice. I would love to know which of these areas of knowledge and skill do you think you use most often? So you don't want to pick you might pick all of them, but like try to think which do you use most often? Okay, I see professionalism, coordination popping in. You also have the chat if you're having any trouble with toolbar. Most often, this is great. Yeah, I'm not surprised to see coordination of services. Yep, I see what you popped in the chat, Linda. That's where we often see folks put a lot of check marks in family-centered practices. Yep, I love that I see professionalism. And actually, infant and toddler development, sometimes when I do a session like this, I don't see as many check marks there. So I love it that you guys there. When the work group was putting these areas of knowledge and skill together, there was conversation about, well, some people are like, well, service coordinators don't have to have a background in early childhood development, right? And there were a lot of folks on this committee saying, absolutely, service coordinators need to have a strong foundation in infant and toddler development because you are part of writing IFSP outcomes, part of the assessment process, part of guiding families to help them embed the strategies they're learning from the providers in their routines. But if you look at, so that I'm happy to see that there. And I see in the chat a lot of overlap there, professionalism, family-centered practices, and coordination. Transition, we don't use that most often, right? Because that happens at certain times in the child's journey and so often certain times of the year. Leadership and teaming, I think that's got quite a few check marks there too. Let's keep thinking about that one and what that might look like. Oh, Chris has said that a majority of service coordination could be the developmental interventionist too. Yeah. Oh, that makes sense. So there could be some infant and toddler development overlap there. Alrighty, so you guys can X out of your annotation toolbar again. I'm going to clear our screen and let's keep talking. All right, so let's think more about that leadership and teaming and how it kind of overlaps with a lot of these other important knowledge areas. So this is a definition also from the Division for Early Childhood and Burns's work that I really like, and this is not specific to service coordination. So leadership is the proactive process of influencing others to act for certain goals that represent the
I'm gonna
value.
pin her again just in
Oops,
case.
Linda, it looks like you might be, I'm going to mute. There you go. That represent the values and motivations, wants, needs, aspirations, and expectations, both of leaders and of followers. So if you were to let's frame this in the service through a service coordination lens. How is service coordination a proactive process of influencing others? How do you think that phrase in bold aligns with the work of service coordination? What do you think? When you think about a proactive process of influencing others, what does that look like in service coordination? Because I absolutely think they overlap. And we could pull this apart more and think of leaders and followers. I don't think we're leaders and followers when we think of service coordination. It's more like service coordinator is the leader and we have partners. So maybe we could say leaders and partners for service coordinators. What do you think? Proactive process of influencing others. Who do service coordinators influence? Yeah, Lauren, we facilitate the planning process of the IFSP. We help, advocate, teach, educate. I love it, Krista, that you see service coordinators through the lens of education. That's fantastic. Parents are inspired by things they see and discuss with the team, including you. We reinforce family learning, advocacy. We're influencing parents, training other service coordinators, Maxine. That's a great point. We proactively noticing a need for other assessments and supporting the family. Sarah, I bet you're also proactively noticing other needs for families. You might see something and be recognizing this family is struggling with, housing, or there's some, resource challenges with this family that you can see and you can step in and support. Guiding conversations at the IFSP. Daniela, I agree with you. You also influence the other practitioners through the leadership that you provide. You guys got it. I totally agree. Lisa says parents are the primary educators of their children, and you're empowering them to educate for their needs. So you're kind of helping connect all the dots across the system. And Linda says we're educating ourselves in the process. Absolutely. So let me ask you guys a question. And this one, again, since we're doing well with the annotation tool, let's try it. Do you feel like a leader? Yes, sometimes no. Let me know what you think. Drop your annotation in there. You got the chat as well. Okay, thanks, Vera. I see yours in the chat. You too, Kara. So we have lots of yes and sometimes. I see some more sometimes in the chat. So let me ask you guys, I'm curious about though, let's start with the sometimes. What makes you feel like a leader sometimes versus others? Like, what is the difference in your work that sometimes you feel like a leader and sometimes you don't? Allison, I see yours is like mostly yes. So you're veering towards the yes area. But those of you that answered sometimes, or maybe even mostly yes, what's the difference between you feeling like a leader sometimes versus not other times? What makes that difference? Is it others? Is it the situation? Tell me more about that in the chat. Okay, so it can depend on the family and the situation, the not your knowledge about EI. Um, yeah, Monique says parents depend on us for more guidance and they might be open to discussing in certain situations. That's a good point. Sometimes families look to the practitioners because they have a more of a relationship. They probably see them more often or in contact with them more often. Others depends on the other end of the, it could be situational. Lisa says sometimes we need to just sit back and listen to others. Yep. And it could be depend on family expectations. So sometimes there are things outside of ourselves. Now I'm going to ask you what inside yourself might affect whether you feel like a leader or not. So you can think about your confidence, your knowledge, your experience. Sometimes those things inside of us can also affect where we feel like even on a given day. Let me ask those of you that answered yes. Tell me more about that. When you say yes, I feel like a leader. Why? How? What helps you feel like that leader when you say yes, I feel like a leader? What helps you that? Christine says knowledge and especially experience. Yeah. And I will tell you, as a brand new service coordinator, I felt like I needed a t-shirt that said, I don't know, but I'll find out. So I didn't feel like a leader because I just needed to practice saying yes. And I needed to follow through and I had so much to learn from my colleagues. I learned tons from parents. I was straight out of college, you guys. I remember even having one parent interview me and ask me my background, how long I'd been doing this. She wanted somebody with experience working with her baby, and I admire that, especially now, looking back at the moment. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm like 22. I don't know how to answer questions, but I don't know, and I'll find out. So Jessica says, yeah, I've done this a very, very long time, so I feel confident to lead. Experience looks like a knowledge is playing a part in that. So sometimes, at least this maybe depends on the child's delays. Knowing the rules, guiding each other. When I feel confident, I know how a specific process is supposed to flow. So confidence, Scotty says, my talents, background, and experience. So what we want is over time that we are feeling more like a yes in more situations. But we also know that we can be doing this job for 20 years and a curveball comes right at us and we've got to reassess the situation, get support from others. But honestly, I think that's part of the fun about early intervention is those curveballs. You're always growing and learning. So thanks for that, guys. You can X out of your annotation. That might be the last time we use it. I don't know. We'll see. But I'm going to go ahead and clear the drawings. Thanks for walking through that with me. Maxine says you need to be open to learning more or revisiting topics as you grow in the position. I 100% agree with that, Maxine. I think like service coordination is a practice, just like early intervention is a practice. And I think that families need service coordinators and practitioners who are current and making an effort to continue to grow. Because I always think like I wouldn't want to take myself or my son to a doctor who learned how to do this 15 years ago and is still doing it that way. So those of us in this field, we are highly trained professionals, just like those doctors. We have that responsibility for ourselves and others too. So I agree with you. So let's think about leadership. So how can we help build our leadership skills? Even those of you that feel confident, let's think about this. What could we do? What do we do well? What could we do better? So 5 competency sets for effective early intervention and early childhood special ed leadership. This was an article and some additional work by Bruns and her colleagues that really focused on what does it take to be a leader in these fields. And you can see the competency sets here on the screen. We're going to walk through each of these and think about what they look like. I'm going to share with you the information from Bruns's work, but we're going to tie it to service coordination. Um, let's see. All right, let's walk through it. Let's just jump right in. So effective relationships, you guys already talked about relationship building and how important that is when we think about working with families, working with other service providers. Um, When we think about leadership and building effective relationship, Brune suggested that leaders have high expectations and high ethical standards. They're adaptable and responsive. They build and sustain relationships across time. They understand the realities of early intervention work, and they're able to model reflective practices. So if you look at these and you were to interpret any of these through the service coordination lens, what might it look like? High expectations and ethical standards. When you think about being adaptable and responsive, how do service coordinators practice that? Because I think you practice it all the time. You are absolutely modeling reflective practices as you help families consider their options and plan for the assessment or the IFSP or write goals. When you think about understanding the realities, I think that one has multiple components. Let's talk about that one in the chat. When you think about understanding the realities, let's think about realities for other team members and families. Why is that so important to understand the realities of families' lives, the realities of the work the other service providers or practitioners are doing? Why is that so important in the relationships for your work? Scotty says to mitigate expectations. Yep. To help everybody kind of get on the same page with expectations, to help sometimes to help expectations align across team members. Yeah, Jessica, it helps when you can meet them with understanding, when you can appreciate what they might be bringing to the table, right? To the table, to the floor, to the home visit, wherever. Holly says, because the reality is that EI may not be a priority for a parent, so you may need to adjust expectations to make sure the parents are being heard. Yeah, good point. And that might not be a priority because we think about Maslow's hierarchy. There could be other things that are just more pressing. That could be things that are like, safety, security. How am I going to feed my family? It makes a lot of sense when those things have to take priority. Sometimes we can help adjust the plan to meet the needs of the parent and maybe help other team members do that too. It can help us meet them with compassion. It can help us to pause. It can help us understand their lives rather than expect them to do everything they're being asked. That difference in expectation can be really powerful. And so you can kind of mediate that with others. When you have a practitioner call and say, this parent is no-showing all the time, or they're on their phone all the time during my visit, that's not a moment for us to judge the parent as, oh, they're not being a good parent. That's a moment for us to check in with the provider and the parent. The parent could be doing those things because early intervention isn't working for them. The parent could be doing those things because they're desperately trying to find a resource or help a family with an emergency, or because they're bored and they don't know what their role is in the visit. There's all kinds of different reasons. So it's good for us to check in on realities to make sure that we're helping the parent get what they need and the provider understand the reality for that parent. There could be cultural barriers. Yep. We're dealing with timelines. Sometimes schedules can be busy. So we're going to keep everybody together, everybody on the same page. Sometimes we don't know how we would respond unless we're in a situation. So Nicole, that is a compassionate, kind of an adaptable perspective to have. You're right. Building outcomes and strategies, making sure that families are concerns are addressed. Oh, I really like that, Julie. Being sure to bring family concerns into the annual IFSP rather than just the practitioner viewpoint. Just adding the parent wants the child to say love you rather than only eat, no, and stop. That's such a great example of, actually, that's a great example of where I'm heading next, Julie. But yeah, the concept of like making sure we're helping the relationships work for the family by bringing in what's really important. And yeah, Linda brings in the timelines. Those are hard. Timelines is a place where we've got to be adaptable, but have high standards because our timelines are federal and state timelines, and they're there as protections for families. They're not there just to make us crazy because sometimes they can feel like that. Let's look at the next one. Shared responsibility. So when we think about shared responsibility is engaging with others to make decisions and build consensus. And you guys do that at all of these different levels. We do that at the compliance level. When we think about compliance and shared responsibility, that's where we can actually bring in those timelines there. When I used to train service coordinators in Virginia, I would share with them something, especially our new service coordinators, and they would get a little scared when I said this, but it's true. One service coordinator in one program that is out of compliance with the federal 45-day timeline, that is not for a family reason. So maybe it's, I just forgot, or I'd calculated the timeline wrong. That service coordinator being out of compliance for the timeline means that program is out of compliance and that state is actually out of compliance. That is scary, right? To think like, oh my gosh, it affects this. But we need to know that you have a very important role. You share responsibility with your local and state program leaders to ensure compliance equals, which means ensure families' rights are respected and their needs are met. It's important. That affects program development, it affects teaming. You are absolutely sharing responsibility for effective and meaningful direct services. And then the individual success of that family and that child comes back to service coordination. I'll tell you, the research tells us, and families tell us, that high quality service coordination sometimes can make or break their experience. So when you do your job really well, it is much more likely that families are going to leave early intervention feeling like they have learned that their child has benefited. They're able to communicate with others about their child. Their own capacity for supporting their child's development has been improved, and they're able to access the resources they need. Kind of like all comes back to service coordination. That's again how important you are. Effective communication goes kind of without saying, right? Write well, speak well, actively listen, communicate openly. But the truth is, these skills come more easily to some than others, but they're super, super important. And they're important that we have these skills, especially when we're working with others who struggle with them. So let's think about this next one, data use. What kind of data do you use on a daily, a weekly basis to provide service coordination? So you can see the general information. Leaders gather data, analyze and synthesize it, share and use it. What's your data as service coordinators? Because your data is probably not, what we often, it may or may not be think about when we think about data. We often think about that as like more formalized stuff. Oh, Sarah gives a great example of sort of formal BDI scores. So Battelle scores. Timelines, how you're tracking timelines is data. Who is coming, who is coming due for reviews, annuals. Yeah, absolutely. Transition planning conferences, absolutely. Session notes is a great source of data. Tracking dates. Do you guys get to see the session notes for the other practitioners other than, your own notes you're writing, but do you get to see the session notes for others? You guys can let me know in chat. You're going to follow up when services are delayed, meeting all those timelines. Thanks, Krista. I see yes. Robin, yes. So when you're kind of weaving the journey together. So all the data we collect helps us make good decisions to lead the team. So when maybe there is a need for a different service provider or need for an IFSP review to meet goals or discharge a service or add a service. Thanks, Helen. So you have the ability to see them. I saw Nicole says depends on the provider. I think it's a fantastic idea to keep up with what's happening in other people's, the child's record with the other providers. It's the best way to know what's happening. But then when you call the family to make a regular contact, you have meaningful information. You can use your data to help the family share what's going well and what they would like to change. So lots of you're accessing a lot of data. You're analyzing and synthesizing it and using it, which is something leaders do. Let's see. Sankita says data gathering is so important to show all the good work we're doing with the family. Excellent point. So let me ask you guys that. Let's take that comment. I love that. How do you use the data to show others what you guys do? How do other people know the good work you do? Where is the data kept? How do you share it with others? How is it used? Progress notes. Yeah, Holly, we all know the dreaded like record review, right? I know when I had to go as a program director and review records, that my staff would kind of cringe seeing me reviewing records. And I'm like, no, this is an opportunity for me to see what you're doing well. If I find something that's missing or a timeline that slipped, we're going to talk about it so that you have the support you need to make sure you meet it next time. But like, it's okay. It's a great place for me to see the work you're doing so well. So annual report, family surveys. Yep, those are big picture state level stuff that help us know how successful or how meaningful early intervention is progressing. IFSP reviews, outcomes, that service coordination goal on the plan for sure. Lots of good places. So we gather data and we're using it to show the impact of our work. All right, I think this is the last one. Professional learning. So, professional learning leaders are folks that coach and mentor others, seek out new knowledge and learn. They're open to ideas and perspectives, and they engage in ongoing learning. So, tell me about, do you guys have the opportunities to coach and mentor others? Some of you might have if you're in particular roles, but how might coaching and mentoring show up for service coordinators? You might also be the receiver of them. Yeah, Nicole says when training new staff. New hires, yep, helping train new folks. I don't know if you guys ever have students you host in your programs, but that's another way to share what you know, but also learn from someone else. Um, and engaging in ongoing learning, you showed up today, so you've got that one. But that idea of seeking out new knowledge and learning from others is an essential part of the work, even when it seems like the paperwork is stacking up, the caseloads are high. We still have to figure out how to find time. And I don't say that flippantly because I literally remember taking journal articles and sitting in the 7-Eleven parking lot between home visits reading because I wanted to learn more. I wanted to grow. So it's hard sometimes, but finding time or even your leaders making space in your schedule for that by maybe like Scotty says, staff meetings that include some training, in-service training can be helpful too. So we've kind of talked through these leadership competencies, seen some overlap with service coordination. I'm wondering, what can make it hard for service coordinators to do this stuff? Build relationships, share responsibility, communicate effectively, use our data, and engage in professional learning. I might have mentioned a few, but when you guys think about your day-to-day work, what can make it hard to do these, to implement these leadership characteristics? Yeah, Scotty says parental hesitance. I think we saw that earlier in some of the chat as well. What can make it hard for you to communicate, to build effective relationships, to engage in the professional learning? What can make it hard? Time. Stacy and Krista, that's right. I see language popping up, poor time management skills. Yeah, even just a lack of time or struggling to manage your time when the other party isn't very responsive. That can be challenging for sure. If the training person does not use a mix of learning styles, Nicole, that's a good point. Yeah. Power struggles. Yep. So let me show you guys what our research suggests, what can make these things hard. So we kind of have what we should be doing, right? And how leadership is naturally reflected in service coordination. But implementing that, acting as the leader in most situations can be hard. And we think big picture down to the individual service coordinator. This is what our research suggests. So a couple of years ago, I worked with a colleague and with the Division for Early Childhood's Service Coordination Committee, and we did some research. We did a nationwide survey of service coordinators and some focus groups to find out about kind of just the status of service coordination across the field. We found these 6 challenges were consistently reported across hundreds of service coordinators. Caseloads was one of the highest, high numbers of families served, and just the stress that can cause and the struggle that service coordinators can feel to be able to do things like communicate effectively, build relationships, etc. Too much to do, not enough time, which you guys have said in the chat. Staff shortages, which again affect that time and the number of families served. High paperwork demands, which is unfortunately just the norm for early intervention, right? Lack of time management and organization skills, which you said, and low pay. Now, I'm not familiar with the pay in New Jersey, but across the field, there's definitely a lot of area for improvement for compensating our service coordinators across the field well. And if we could better manage the workload, including caseload of service coordinators have told us they would feel more confident in their job and feel less stressed. When we asked these service coordinators, actually in this study and in a previous study that was published in 2019, what would help you, what would be the best way to improve service coordination? They told us balance the workload by decreasing the number of families served and decreasing the amount of paperwork. What do you guys think about this? Would you agree? Do you think there's anything we missed? When you think about this slide and the previous one, anything you would add? Do you think, yes, please, like I mean, nobody's going to go, no, don't pay me more. I'm paid just fine. We all want to get paid more. Anything you guys would add? Like if we could improve service coordination, what would you like to see us do? Us meaning the field. Maybe your leadership, you can think about your program level, state level, big picture. Julie makes a great point. I can help families more with a lower caseload, for sure. We would love to see having coordinators involved in policy, procedure, decisions, and changes. That would be powerful, Scotty. I think we should have the voices of the people impacted by the policy and procedures involved in the discussions. If we can improve training across the system so other professionals understand our role. Excellent point, Jessica. So other than that, it would be to have people make changes understand our job. Good point. Additional resources in multiple languages, super important. Reinforcement of expectations across the team. And if EI is designed in a way that works for all of us as it stands, we are working. So Laura, you can tell me more about that one. Link up pediatricians so they know the facts and they know your role. See, pediatricians probably don't know what they may not know what a service coordinator is either. So these are fantastic suggestions. Streamline online systems to improve efficiency and convenience for families. In Virginia, I know I hear folks say that about our electronic medical record. If we could streamline it better, it makes the work easier, eliminate redundancy, things like that. So I'm going to share with you some suggestions for program leaders and for service coordinators to help achieve some of this, to help us be stronger leaders as service coordinators, help us feel like we are leaders in more situations, and maybe improve service coordination by considering things like workload, the amount of paperwork, all that good stuff. So we think about what program leaders and administrators could do. Our research suggests the research where we've asked service coordinators have said, we need our leaders and administrators to really understand what service coordinators do, which I see that in the chat. We need our administrators to provide support. We need administrative support and reflective supervision. That maybe there are some aspects of the service coordination work, particularly some of the paperwork, that could be supported by someone else, depending on how your system works. We want to recognize that reduced caseloads increase capacity for teaming and to be able to lead that team and higher quality service coordination. This was interesting. I'll tell you, I'm getting ahead, but I'll tell you, what do you think? Okay, let me ask you guys this. When we think about caseload, what would be your ideal number? So caseload, numbers of families served at any one point in time, not over the course of a whole year, but like today, if you could think this would be my ideal number for me to be able to provide the high quality service coordination I would like to provide. Oh, I see a lot of 50, 60s, 30, 65. These came in fast. You guys definitely feel this one. 40, 45. Okay. That's so interesting. A lot of consensus there. So Nicole says 60 is what we're supposed to have. So I want you guys to think about it doesn't necessarily have to align with what you're supposed to have with what you feel would be most effective for you. So I'll tell you the research where we asked service coordinators about their caseloads and what their ideal number would be. Across the field, now this was mostly, we had a larger response from folks that are in a dedicated role. So they were not also like a developmental interventionist or a PT or OT. They tended to say that they were anywhere from 40 to 50 was the ideal caseload range. You guys are going a little higher than that, which is awesome. We actually had some people that said, I can barely handle the 20 that I have, but that might be because they have 20 families with very high needs in an under-resourced area. But 40 to 50 was the range that we found in one study so far. The challenge is there's no federal requirement or cap. Some states have a cap, or some states have a recommendation, and some programs have a recommendation. We haven't achieved guidance across our field to say this is what we all should have. But it's worth considering as administrators to ask your staff where would they feel like they could do their job the best, and then seeing if there's any barriers we can get out of the way to get closer to that number. Ingrid says 40 sounds really good. Yeah. And then the last bullet here, the service coordinators said they needed their leaders to advocate for higher pay. So the compensation reflects the complexity of the work. Stacy says 40 to 50 sounds good. I bet those of you that are having 65, 40 to 50 probably would sound pretty nice. Let's think a couple more strategies for leaders. So service coordinators said they would love for administrators and leaders to make teaming an expectation. So it is a part of the culture that the culture, so the folks in your office, maybe the folks that you'll contract with, your practitioners, understand how teaming works and understand the leadership role of the service coordinator. That all team members are oriented to that leadership role and that there's scheduled time, sometime, for everyone to come together to train and problem solve together, which would also help with the first two bullets. We come together as a team to train and problem solve together. And by doing that, we can recognize that leadership role. Anything else you guys would add for leaders? Is there anything else that you would say, I would love if our leaders, and you don't need to say, I wish, you know, my leader Dana would do this. You could say just globally, anything else you would add to this list for leadership that you would like to say that you haven't already put in the chat. If there's anything else, feel free to drop it in. But now we're going to think about what can service coordinators do to help make this happen. And this is, again, based on feedback from service coordinators in our research. And what I kind of want you to walk away from. So as service coordinators, I invite you to embrace your leadership role. And I can tell from the chat comments and the activities we've done that you're doing that, which I love. I would encourage you to prioritize partnership. Make time to get to know your team members, check in regularly with them so you have that effective communication and understand and respect each other's roles. And in doing that, help others understand your role. Be open to suggestions, ideas, and feedback, especially when you're getting to know your other team members, especially new team members. Help them understand your role. Ask them for suggestions. After an IFSP meeting, invite your team members to give you feedback. How did you think that went? Is there anything that could have happened differently during that test? That test. That boy, I'm clearly thinking as a professor. During that meeting, that could have gone better. Recognize that all decisions are team decisions, and all means all. So we want to make sure that the family member, any other family members that are involved, and your other team members, they're all part of these the team decisions. So that's why, for instance, our IFSP review meetings are so important. Be sure to access your team members for the resources they are. Tap into their expertise and invite them to tap into your own, because that helps them understand what you do and what you know. And then by doing all of this work, you can be a part of making teaming and collaboration a part of your agency's culture. That can happen in how you facilitate the team activities as that leader. So as we're wrapping up, my parting message, I want you to value yourselves for the leaders and experts you are. There's nobody else like you. There's actually not a role like you when families transition to preschool or to other types of services. You are in a unique, highly specialized role that requires expertise, and you're absolutely a leader. Because leadership is not about titles. It's really not about positions or flowcharts. It's about one life influencing each other. And I would say, having been a service coordinator, having received service coordinator, having trained service coordinators and researched them, gosh, I've been doing this for a long time. You guys influence families every single day and other providers that makes this a positive experience for families. So give yourselves a pat on the back. Absorb that the influence you have you might be teaching a family, helping them think about something, teaching them advocacy skills that could change the trajectory of that child's life, change the way they think about their child, or positively affect that family's quality of life. I mean, it doesn't kind of get any better than that when you think about a fantastic job like service coordination. So with that, I'm going to wrap us up. This is my email. If you need me, you're welcome to reach out to me for any resources, questions. If you have thoughts you want to share, I love to see you pop into my inbox, so know that it's there. We have a few more minutes, so if there's any other questions you have, you're welcome to drop it into the chat. I don't really mind if you unmute and ask a question that way.